My name is Sarah. I am 38 years old. I have been married to my husband Michael for 15 years. There was a time when I believed I was the luckiest woman in the world. Michael was not rich. He was not famous, but he loved me in a way that made me feel safe. Every morning he kissed my forehead before leaving for work. Every evening he asked me about my day. Sometimes he came home with flowers for no reason. Sometimes he left little notes on the kitchen table that said, "I love you, Sarah." Back then, our house felt alive. We laughed together. We dreamed together. We planned our future together. We have 2 children. Our son, Noah, is 13 years old. He loves soccer and always makes us laugh. Our daughter, Emma, is 10 years old. She loves painting and singing around the house. They are the best part of my life. For many years, everything felt normal. Not perfect, but good. Good enough to make me believe our marriage would last forever. But somewhere along the way, something changed. At first, it happened so quietly that I barely noticed it. Michael stopped bringing flowers home. The little notes disappeared. The goodnight kisses became less frequent. Then the conversations started disappearing too. I would ask him, "How was your day?" And he would simply say, "Fine." Nothing more. During dinner, he stared at his plate. After dinner, he sat silently on the couch watching television. Sometimes I looked at him for several minutes, hoping he would notice me, but most of the time, he didn't. The hardest part wasn't the silence. The hardest part was feeling invisible inside my own marriage. One evening, I stood in front of the mirror before dinner. I wore a new blue dress that I had bought the week before. I fixed my hair carefully. I even put on makeup. When Michael walked through the front door, I smiled nervously. "Do you notice anything different?" I asked. He looked at me for a second. Then he said, "Did you change the curtains?" I laughed a little so he wouldn't see how much it hurt. But later that night, I cried alone in the bathroom, not because of the dress, because I realized my husband no longer looked at me the way he used to. Weeks turned into months. Months turned into years. Michael still came home every night. He still paid the bills. He still fixed things around the house. He was present, but somehow he felt so far away. One night, after the children were asleep, I sat beside him on the couch. I rested my head on his shoulder the way I used to. But after a few seconds, he stood up and walked into the kitchen. He didn't say anything. He just walked away. That was the moment I felt something break inside me. For the first time in 15 years, I started asking myself a question I never thought I would ask. Does my husband still love me? And the worst part was, I was beginning to believe the answer was no. After that night, I couldn't stop thinking about the question in my mind. Does my husband still love me? The question followed me everywhere, while cooking breakfast, while folding laundry, even when I was trying to sleep. I kept searching for signs that Michael still cared about me, but the more I searched, the more lost I felt. A few weeks later, our wedding anniversary was coming. 15 years. 15 years of marriage. 15 years of memories. Part of me hoped this anniversary would be different. Maybe Michael was just stressed. Maybe work was overwhelming him. Maybe he still loved me but didn't know how to show it anymore. I wanted to believe that. I needed to believe that. So I planned everything myself. I booked a table at the restaurant where we had our first date. I even found an old photograph from our wedding day and placed it in a beautiful frame. Looking at that photo made me smile. We looked so happy, so young, so in love. I stared at Michael's face in that picture for a long time. What happened to us? The evening finally arrived. I wore the same perfume I used to wear when we first met. I fixed my hair carefully. My hands were shaking with nervous excitement. For the first time in years, I felt hopeful. Then my phone rang. It was Michael. I smiled and answered immediately. "Hi, Michael." His voice sounded distracted. "Sarah, I'm sorry." My heart immediately sank. "Sorry for what?" He sighed. "I can't make it tonight. Something came up at work." For a few seconds, I couldn't speak. The restaurant reservation, the framed photograph, the hope I had been carrying all day. Everything shattered in a single moment. "Oh, okay." That was all I could say. He quickly replied, "Thank you for understanding." Then he hung up. I stood alone in the kitchen holding my phone. The house was completely quiet. And suddenly, I started crying. Not because he missed dinner, but because I realized he didn't even remember what day it was. 15 years of marriage, and he forgot our anniversary. That night, I sat alone at the restaurant table. Around me, couples laughed together. They held hands, they smiled at each other, and I sat there pretending not to cry. When I finally got home, Michael was already asleep. His laptop was open beside him. I stood there, looking at him for several minutes. The man I loved was right in front of me, yet I had never felt more alone. The next morning, I found something unexpected while cleaning the bedroom. It was an old notebook. Curious, I opened it. Inside were pages filled with memories, ticket stubs for movies we watched together, notes from vacations, small memories from our life together. Then I reached the final page. There was a sentence written in Michael's handwriting. "I hope Sarah never realizes how much I'm struggling." My heart stopped. Struggling with what? I stared at those words again and again, and for the first time, I began to wonder if there was something happening in Michael's life that I didn't know about. And that thought scared me more than anything. After finding that notebook, I couldn't stop thinking about Michael's words. "I hope Sarah never realizes how much I'm struggling." Those words stayed in my mind for days. Every time I looked at my husband, I saw someone carrying a burden he refused to share. But why? Why would the man who once told me everything suddenly hide his pain from me? One evening, after dinner, Michael was sitting quietly in the living room. Just like always. His eyes looked tired. Not physically tired, emotionally tired. I sat beside him. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then I finally asked, "Michael, are you okay?" He looked surprised. Of course. It was the same answer he always gave. But this time I wasn't going to let him hide. I reached into my bag and placed the notebook on the table. The moment Michael saw it, his face changed. He looked away immediately. "You read it?" he asked quietly. "Yes." I nodded. Tears slowly filled my eyes. "What are you struggling with, Michael?" For a long time, he said nothing. Then suddenly, Michael started crying. In 15 years of marriage, I had never seen him cry like that. Not once. His shoulders shook. Years of pain seemed to pour out of him at once. "I'm scared, Sarah." Those 4 words broke me. Michael was always strong. Seeing him this vulnerable felt unreal. "Scared of what?" I whispered. Michael wiped his eyes. Then he looked directly at me. 3 years ago, the company almost closed. I thought I was going to lose my job. At the same time, Mom became sick. The medical bills kept growing. I started taking loans to help her. I stared at him in shock. Loans? I never knew any of this. Michael lowered his head. "I didn't tell you because I didn't want you to worry. Every day I kept telling myself I could fix it. But the more I tried, the worse things became." Suddenly, everything made sense. The late nights, the distance, the silence. It wasn't because he stopped loving me. It was because he was drowning alone. Tears rolled down my face. All these years, I thought Michael didn't love me anymore. But the truth was far more painful. He loved me so much that he carried every burden by himself. I moved closer and held his hand. "Michael, you should have told me. We're supposed to face life together." Michael looked down. "I know, but I was afraid. Afraid you'd see me as a failure." Hearing that shattered my heart completely. A failure? "Michael, do you really think I would ever see you that way?" He didn't answer, and that silence told me everything. I placed my hand on his face. "Listen to me. I never needed a perfect husband. I never needed a rich husband. I only needed you." Michael closed his eyes. More tears fell from his face. Then he whispered the words I had waited to hear. "I love you, Sarah. I never stopped loving you." I completely broke down. Because for years, I believed the man I loved had stopped loving me. But the truth was that he had been fighting battles I never knew existed. That night, we sat together until sunrise. We talked. Really talked. For the first time in years, there were no walls between us. Today, our marriage is not perfect. We still have problems. We still have difficult days. But now we face them together. And whenever I feel lonely, Michael reaches for my hand, just like he used to. Life taught me something important. Love doesn't always disappear when people grow distant. Sometimes love hides behind stress, fear, pain, and silence. Before you assume someone stopped loving you, make sure they are secretly fighting a battle you cannot see. Because sometimes, the people who love us the most are the ones suffering quietly right beside us.